22 years later, Norman Bates is home. Psycho 2.
It's starting again.
Hey, welcome back. This is episode 3 of Late Night Lycanthrope Reviews. I'm your host, Kyle Martin, and today we're going to be talking about another sequel. And it's also another sequel to an immortal classic. And this film, in my regard, I prefer more than the original film. And the film that we're going to be talking about today is Psycho 2.
Norman Bates is coming home.
I own a motel not too far from here. And you'd be welcome to spend the night in one of the empty rooms if you'd like.
Psycho 2, made in 1983, directed by Richard Franklin, written by Tom Holland. Tom Holland would eventually go on to write and direct Fright Night, co-write and direct Child's Play. This could have been a very easy cash grab situation. You know, everyone's going to go see the sequel to Psycho because Psycho is an immortal classic of the genre. It did create the slasher subgenre. It was the first movie to have a killer with a knife stalking women. Tom Holland, you have to give him his credit, really dove into this script. Took Norman Bates from the first movie, and he gets out after 20 some odd years in the asylum, goes back to his house and to the motel. This film really treats him as our hero. He's a very sympathetic character in this movie. It's brilliant how they portray him as this guy who is literally just trying to get on with his life. He knows what he did was terrible. He knows that he had no control over it, but now he just wants to move on. He just wants to not be that known as that person. He wants to do good. Lila Loomis from the first movie comes back, and Vera Miles, the actress that played Lila in the first Psycho, comes back to play her in this movie. So it's those little details as, like, you know, horror fans that we love. You know, when the original actors come back into those roles, it means the world to us. It's just that thin continuity that just, you know, makes everything. Very adamant of him not being released. You know, he murdered her sister in the first movie. You know, who would want that person out on the street? You know, but Norman is released, and he goes back home, and from the first moment he sees that house, he's already starting to break. You know, he sees a figure in the window, and he's like, "Is that Mother?" You know, and but that's the great thing that this movie does, is that it's told from Norman's perspective. And you don't know if what he's seeing is in his head, or if it's someone messing with him and trying to make him go insane. This movie is all a cat and mouse game inside of Norman's head, of him trying to figure out what is real and what's in his head. And that is the brilliance of this movie, and why I think it is better than the original Psycho. The Psycho is an immortal classic. What Richard Franklin does is takes the tools that Hitchcock created, and he makes them better. He amplifies them. He does things that Hitchcock couldn't do in the first Psycho movie. You know, technology had advanced, and, you know, the sensors, he was able to get away with more than what Alfred Hitchcock was back in the 60s, and he amplifies it. Another person who I think took Hitchcock's techniques and made them better is Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma was a student of Alfred Hitchcock films, and in his early 70s and 80s films, you can just see that he is just, you know, riffing on Hitchcock in these movies, and he's, you know, he's taking all these shots that, you know, and these techniques that Hitchcock created, and he's being like, yeah, you did that back then, but I'm going to make it, you know, 10 times more gory, or 10 times more sexy, or 10 times more thrilling. And it fucking works, man. And Brian De Palma is a god, and we will get to his films later on in this month. But right now we're going to be talking about Psycho 2 and Richard Franklin. And there are a ton of little things that Richard Franklin does in this movie. There's a scene when Norman is having a discussion with Mother inside of his head, and you see the reflection of a young Norman in a doorknob. And it's just those little details where you're just like, is he going insane? is he just having a moment right now? Like, what is going on? And it keeps you guessing throughout the entire movie. It never lets up. Right up until like the last 10 minutes of the movie, you don't really know what's going on. And that all, I think, has to do with Tom Holland, who wrote a really great script. I think this is a script that it's just like, you just shoot that script and you got a great movie. But then you brought in a great director, really cared about the material and really understood the technique that he had to do and what Hitchcock had done before, and he knew what he needed to do to make it better and make it a companion piece with Psycho. Great thing about Richard Franklin is that he was teaching at USC. He was teaching a Hitchcock class, and Hitchcock actually came in to like sit in on the class. This weird symbiotic thing that, you know, brought these two together and that made, you know, Richard Franklin basically the master of the Hitchcock films. So he was an obvious choice to take on this movie. Anthony Perkins comes back to play Norman Bates, and man, does he just gets his character, you know. He best known for playing Norman Bates, you know, but in his other films he's a fantastic actor, and I think he did get pigeonholed into playing Norman Bates, you know, later on in his career. He reprised the role 2 more times after this film. But there's a Orson Welles movie called The Trial, which is my favorite Orson Welles film, and I think is Anthony Perkins' best role. So you should all go check that out. It's not a horror film, it's a drama, but it's really good, and you should all just expand your cinema history. But Anthony Perkins, he brings it in this movie. He knows the character inside and out, plays it so well where you're just like, you're so sympathetic towards him. Because we were sympathetic towards him in the first Psycho, and he just brings that back in this film, and you're like, you really just care for him. You care for this psycho. You don't want him to go insane, you know? And everyone else around him who's trying to make him go crazy, you want him to kill them, you know, because it's the protagonist and the antagonist are just, you know, piling on top of him. He's the underdog in this movie, you know, and it treats him so well, and you care for him so much throughout this movie, and you just feel bad for what is happening to him because you know he has no control over anything. Everything is happening to him. His mother is still inside of his head talking to him, and you have Lila Loomis pressuring him, his past and what he did. And then you have Meg Tilly's character, plays Mary, who works at the restaurant that Norman works at for a little bit. She's a waitress, he's a cook, and they form this relationship. And it's not necessarily a sexual relationship. It's this weird friendship that they develop. And she stays with him at his house multiple times, and she grows to care for him. Her character comes off as a person who doesn't really have anyone in her life. You know, she's never really had someone there to care for, and she's never had someone to care for. And finally she has this person that needs her. He needs her more than she needs him, you know, because he's in this house, and there's this beautiful scene between them when she's first staying over, and he says, you know, you're scared of me because of what I did in my past, but I'm just scared of being in this house by myself, and that's why I want you here. And it's just this beautiful relationship that blossoms throughout the entire movie. She really holds her own against Anthony Perkins in this movie, the relationship that they create with each other. And this was really her first big movie too, and she's going toe-to-toe with Anthony Perkins, who is a seasoned actor at this point. You got Vera Miles in this movie too, which she shares a number of scenes with too. Robert Loggia, another veteran actor, and she's holding her own in this movie, and she's really talented, and you can just tell she's just as good as everyone else in this movie, and I have nothing but respect for her. She won a Golden Globe, and she was nominated for an Oscar for Agnes of God, and then she ended up retiring from acting in the mid-90s to raise a family, and that's, you know, respectable on its own. But she actually has started acting in movies again. Can't wait to see her in more movies, and I think she is a very talented actress. Really is the standout in this movie. You know, Perkins has a solid performance, but Meg Tilly really just comes out of left field, and you're like, wow, who is this actress? Man, she is amazing. Spoiler right now. I mean, this movie's been out for 30-some years. You should all go have seen it by now. But spoiler alerts. Mary turns out to be Lila Loomis's daughter. And Mary and Lila have coerced this plan to invade Norman's life, dress up as his mother, and hide throughout the house, you know, and manipulate him to believe that his mother is still alive, and to drive him nuts, to drive him crazy again. Midway through the movie, Mary has developed these genuine feelings for Norman that she doesn't want to go along with it anymore. She's done. She's and seen the error of her ways, and she despises her mother for, you know, getting her into this plan. And Lila has become, you know, tunnel visioned into just driving Norman insane again. She will do it at any means necessary to get him locked back up. And she doesn't care, and she can't be reasoned with, she can't be talked to about it. She has a plan, and she's going through with it. So Mary kind of like cuts off ties with her mother, and she tries to tell Norman that it was all a plan of hers and her mother's to drive him crazy. But at this point, Norman is already kind of too far gone. You know, he's having discussions with his mother on the phone. Robert Loggia's in this movie, and Robert Loggia plays Norman's psychiatrist, and he plays basically the greatest psychiatrist in the world. He cares so much for Norman, and he wants him to succeed so bad, and he just basically does whatever he can for him. And so he is trying to stop Lila Loomis. He's trying to convince Norman that he's not going insane. Mary's trying to tell Norman that it was all part of her and her mother's plan. He's kind of just too far gone at this point, and he's slowly just like getting back into his old ways. And then there are these murders that are happening throughout the movie where you don't know who's murdering these people. Is it Norman? Is it Lila Loomis? Is it somebody else? Is it Mother? Is she back from the dead? We don't know. And that's what this movie just does a great job of, just keeping it a mystery. It's like we know Norman is the killer, but we don't think he can actually kill these people. You know, it's just like everything should be pointing towards Norman being the killer, but we don't want to accept that. We don't want to believe that he could kill these people. It has to be somebody else. And it would be devastating if he actually did kill these people, because we just want him to succeed. That's what this movie does so well. It gets us to sympathize with a killer. Yeah, I mean, everyone is just bringing their A game to this movie. Towards the end of the movie, it's amped up to 11, and you're in it, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire way of this movie. I just got sucked into it. Lila Loomis sneaks back into Norman's house. And it is one of the most brutal kills I have ever seen. It is so horrific, and when that knife just enters into her mouth, and it holds on it. It just holds on it for like a second, but you just feel that pain, and it's nothing like you ever saw before. And that's one of the great things that, you know, Richard Franklin could do that Alfred Hitchcock couldn't. You know, he could get away with a lot more brutal kills. Gotcha!
My loving mother. Just give me the knife.
You know, we get that shower sequence in the first movie, and it's brutal, but it's all editing. We never see really the knife puncture any skin, really. It's all the editing that convinces our mind that she's being stabbed. That's brilliant onto its own, but I mean, we really get to go loose with, you know, great special effects in this movie. Like I said in the Phantasm 2 review, it does what a sequel should do. It takes everything great about the first film and it amplifies it up to 11. It's bigger, it's badder, it's meaner. I cannot praise this movie enough, and I think you all should go watch it. Another Shout Factory release, Scream Factory. They put out this film a number of years ago. You can still buy it on Amazon or on their website, preferably on their website, since support them. The special features are a bit limited on this release, unfortunately. You get an audio commentary with the screenwriter Tom Holland, and he's very knowledgeable, and talking about Hitchcock and talking about Richard Franklin. He has nothing but praise for them. He has nothing but praise for the cast and for everyone involved in it, and he's full of stories, and you should all go listen to that commentary. There's some vintage video interviews and audio interviews with Perkins and Vera Miles, and the director Richard Franklin. There's the original theatrical trailer and some TV spots. That's really it, though. You know, it's a pretty bare bones, but it's a beautiful transfer. It's a beautiful Blu-ray. Holds up. I like revisiting this movie more than I like revisiting Psycho. It's just the love and the care that went into this movie. I feel like they honor Hitchcock. They take everything that he did and they make it better. Rare film where, in my opinion, I like revisiting this movie more than Psycho. I love Psycho. I think Psycho is amazing. It's a milestone in filmmaking. But I think this is a very underappreciated movie, And I think that if you're a fan of Psycho, you'll love Psycho too. Really give it a shot. And you should really go buy the Scream Factory Blu-ray. But yeah, definitely go check this movie out. Great kills in it. It's a great mystery. Solid filmmaking. It's a solid thriller. Yeah, Psycho 2, 1983. Directed by Richard Franklin. Written by Tom Holland. Thank you for tuning in again for Late Night Lycanthrope Reviews. Tune in tomorrow. Like this video. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Reach out to me on Facebook. Reach out to me on Instagram. That's where I'm like most active on Instagram. Supertramp_Kyle. Listen to my podcast that I do with my friend Alden. Late Night Lycanthrope Nightmare Podcast. Treat others the way that you would want to be treated. See you tomorrow.